So I don't really have an agenda of topics to talk about today. I do kind of want to just speak a little bit about the idea or the ideas about what we don't know as a human species. I guess that's kind of a weird topic. How do you talk about something that nobody knows? So to make this make a little bit more sense, obviously, as someone who does intuitive types of work or type of work, I'm oftentimes met with a lot of skepticism and pessimism. And I actually already did a video about this. And part of me kind of rolls my eyes putting this information out there because I'm just like, I don't really want people to think that I'm kind of like thinking everybody else is the problem or I'm kind of attacking other people. But what I want to do is encourage everybody to have a little bit more self-examination in regards to what they do know and what they don't know, and in some ways why that's kind of irrelevant for a number of different reasons. And I'm gonna close my windows really quick. One of my neighbors closed their window. I think it's because mine are all open and I'm just screaming about this stuff in here. Yeah, just ignore me. Anyway, so why is self-examination important about what we do and what we don't know? I mean, there's so many different kind of like layers and elements to this. So in terms of what we don't know as a species, in more of a metaphysical sense, there's a lot, right? We don't really know how we got here as people, as human beings, when we're going to leave this planet, which is also kind of like fascinating and interesting if you think about it. Like, we know so much about medicine, while also we kind of really don't know a lot about medicine because we still have very many uncured diseases. I'm not talking smack about medicine. That's not like the intention here, because also I live, exist, and use Western medicine. But any and all questions surrounding our existence are kind of like a big question mark. Particularly how we operate as human beings. There's really no answer for why we have consciousness, really for why anything exists, to be honest with you. We don't really know why our Earth exists. We generally have theories for like anything and everything, but not only is there hypothetically no like real sense of truth, because even things that we consider to be law, right? Like, we have like a lot of scientific laws. There's really no telling when that law's timeline could be up. We just have no finite predictions. Like, we could theoretically wake up tomorrow and none of this exists, right? Like, it's not really something that we think about because for a long period of time, we have had, a pretty significant level of consistency. However, realistically, our human timeline is not like that long. Like, we probably should be knocking on wood that we continue to exist as a species, honestly. But it's just not really something that we even think about. So I think in general, I find it kind of funny because even if you take away the elements of who are we, why are we here, we don't really understand our point and place in this larger existence, but in sort of a very ironic sense, we really barely know what's going on with the world that we actually live in. Yes, we've been able to kind of like deduce patterns, but again, that's only knowledge that we have for a certain amount of time. Our understanding of what's going on around us is changing rapidly, literally changing every single second. So while we have a pretty comprehensive understanding of how to take care of ourselves as human beings, what our expectations are for the future, it's just never going to be finite. And the quicker that our consciousness starts to evolve, the more challenging it is going to be for science to keep up, personally, I believe, which I've talked about in a previous video, unless we start integrating more intuition and consciousness into science, medicine, math, whatever. So there's that. We literally, we barely have an understanding of what's going on outside of this Earth, but also inside of the Earth. Like, we do not know what's at the bottom of the ocean. We do not know what is encompassing like parts unknown, essentially. of the earth that we live in. And it's like, it's really strange to consider that we are the smartest species of living consciousness on this planet, yet we, in a weird way, have no desire to look so deeply into these parts unknown. Like, we're the smartest human race, but we're also, in a weird way, completely satisfied with the status quo. Like, yes, we have an interest and curiosity as human beings, but we tend to shy away from a lot of philosophy and metaphysics, at least from what I've kind of observed and gathered from people. The other kind of like ironic counterpart to this is that just because we are the most intelligent species here on this planet does not mean that we, one, know anything and everything, but two, also know the correct way to live. I don't think it's a secret that we've caused a lot of problems on this planet. We've annihilated a lot of different species. And so I do wonder philosophically and hypothetically if we've essentially created all of the problems that we know and understand that plague us. I feel like that's probably the right answer. I think that Earth would be a very peaceful place without us existing in it. We have limited understanding of the Earth, of what's around the Earth, of ourselves as human beings from a philosophical, metaphysical perspective. But the largest irony of all is that we as people don't even know ourselves. Yes, we know and understand a lot of statistics about ourselves. We know our names, we know our age, we know a decent amount of things that we like in this lifetime, right? Like, I think that we have tied together a string of things which forms our identity. But if you start to ask the average person a lot of intimate details about their association with themselves, only with themselves, but also in the larger scope of humanity and existence, everybody kind of folds under this pressure. They really have no idea who they are, what they want, and what their purpose here is on Earth. Am I saying that this is a requirement? No, but I think it would be really helpful. And yes, this kind of goes into like a spiritual realm-ish, but I don't think that if you don't want to consider yourself spiritual, I think that these are still extremely relevant questions. It doesn't really matter what happens to you after you die. It's simply the fact that we are all in this similar perceived reality with each other. And we need to come to some kind of a conclusion as to what we want to do, whether it's in this current present moment, or if it's later down the line, 5, 10, 15 years, whatever, how we want to impact ourselves and how we want to impact other people. I think that subconsciously, everybody reasonably has a bit of intuitive alignment, right? Like, we tend to guide ourselves based on our subconscious. I feel like doing this, I want to do this, but it seems like it kind of stops once you get to like a certain threshold of, intensity of asks and questions. If we don't start asking ourselves, what is the point and purpose of our existence for ourselves, for the larger picture? Why are we here? Why do we want to be here? And really examining, not even just those like hypothetical questions, but starting to examine anything and everything in our life with a really, tighter lens. I think that we're going to not only have issues with self-identity in terms of it potentially being weak or collapsing over time, but also allowing others to much more easily manipulate us and be able to have, us bend to their will, essentially. I think that there's kind of this misunderstanding in a way that some people can be victimized for really no other reason besides them being a victim. And yes, that's true. Like, I'm not here to argue about what makes someone a victim and what doesn't. And by the way, victim is an incredibly broad term when I'm using it. Like, you could be just a victim of any circumstance. I genuinely find that people are victims to themselves or victims to other people when they don't have a really strong understanding of who they are themselves, and again, also relative to the other people around them. And other people around them can be anybody. It can, of course, be your family and your close friends, but it also can just be your community. It could be Earth. It could be strangers. Like, you don't even necessarily have to have super close relationships in order to feel this connection. You could literally just like pop up in a church on a Sunday and you feel that earthly, community connection. Like, I think that connection goes really far beyond just your kind of like biological or historical connections. In order to feel a connection with the earth, I'm sure anybody will tell you they've been able to feel this. You could even literally just be going out by yourself in nature, you know what I mean? But it's just that kind of soul level connection that you really need to harness in order to feel your place within a larger environment and a larger setting. It's really important to have somewhat of an answer to these questions and also be able to self-identify or be able to self-validate, because otherwise your identity as a person, again, is just kind of like quite weak and you'll just be ultimately very impressionable. And I know that I'm talking about this in a way that's like sort of a throwaway comment, but as I'm sort of connecting to the point of everything that I'm saying, which I kind of do on a whim, so I'm sorry if I sort of ramble or talk slow, but I think that there is a huge identity crisis happening now. I think that's why people are forming very alternative communities, having very large obsessions with political figures and or really any other public figures as well, because I think that a lot of people are really struggling and looking to find an identity, and they're looking to others to sort of grab onto parts and pieces that they're liking. And that's where this kind of like obsession quality comes in, because it's honestly like a soul level need that people need to have. So that's why there's this kind of confusion and desperation and disorganization in terms of, what people are observing with these public figures and how they want to integrate those same values, concepts, themes, whatever, into their own life. The truth is that these people should only serve for like a small level of inspiration, but we cannot look to people that we look up to in order to validate ourselves. It needs to come from within, or else we'll be so easily impressionable, we'll be so easily brainwashed, and we'll just be like floating within this weird space that like we're part of one community, the community dies, we just float to another different community, and all we're doing is just serving what we feel we should be embodying at a certain time. We might not even feel that it intuitively resonates for us, but just based on, popularity or whatever, it literally doesn't matter. It could be popularity, it could be people who have a lot of wealth, people who have a lot of fame. It's just like things that we kind of physically, materialistically admire in other people that we think that we should have. We just start kind of like collecting and consuming that stuff, not necessarily physical stuff, but also like identity stuff and energy stuff and whatever. And in like a weird way, consuming energy that you don't need because you're confused with who you are is kind of weirdly similar to accumulating a lot of physical stuff that you don't need, almost like in a hoarding sense. So if we think about physical hoarders, they don't necessarily need to be energetic hoarders, but there's obviously like, cross there, like you can be an energetic hoarder, but also not a physical hoarder. It's kind of doing the same thing. It's just taking and taking and taking resources and energy that like other people either potentially need or just things in general that don't serve you that ultimately become a detriment to you. Because if you consider it, you're just taking on energy that you think that you may need, but you don't really need it. And this could result in a lot of weird things happening to you. Again, like these really mixed identity issues. You could be just like physically taking a lot of stuff on. It could be like energetic debris. It could be like weight. It could be health issues. Just things in general that you don't need. And it's becoming kind of a problem because we're in this like energetic consumerism type of place because there's nothing that's like really solidified within us. I don't really know why. I think that like there's a few different reasons for this. It could be that like we're not necessarily less spiritual, but more new age spiritual. So like, we're just needing to form kind of like our place within ourselves, again, within larger context, and it's just taking a while for it to happen. It could also be like how people theorize that we're moving into 5D, or in other words, a different type of dimension where we're needing to be leaning on more mental, emotional, and spiritual versus only physical. And so we're, while we were able to kind of hoard a lot of things to be buried on top of lack of self, now stuff is being like kind of metaphorically stripped away from us, and we're just freaking out because we feel very empty inside, some of us, right? And it's, it's just what it is. There's no shame. I'm not saying that, you're wrong or bad for doing that. It's just been the way that a lot of people have been living, but I don't think it's going to be very sustainable moving forward. And I say it as kind of like a gentle warning because I don't want there to be a time and a place where people are stripped of everything and then they have a mental breakdown, right? Like we obviously don't want to get to that point in place. So the question is, how do we sort of avoid this from happening? I know that I've gone like really shifting far away from the point, which maybe I guess was supposed to happen because I felt like I didn't really have necessarily an agenda, but there's this mental, emotional, and spiritual ambiguity when you release control that you think that you know everything, and or that everything that you perceive, you are only perceiving at face value. This physical consumerism, this energetic consumerism, I think is also a byproduct of maybe not necessarily too much choice and options. Actually, maybe too much choice and options is pretty much like the big problem. But also the lack of cultural emphasis on philosophy, psychology, metaphysics, asking why. Like, there's this like big complaint that we're not teaching kids how to be like problem solvers and critical thinkers and simply get these great test scores. And while this isn't like a deep dive into like why we should change the school system is just the symptom of like a larger problem. But that's kind of like where my head is at and what I'm thinking. I think that it's our responsibility as leaders, facilitators, and parents to start emphasizing the importance of having self-identity, releasing validation needed from other people, and really aligning really, really well to what you want out of this lifetime. Who do you feel you are? Why do you feel like you're here? What do you want to accomplish in this lifetime? What are your kind of like goals? And it's just so annoying in a sense, because like, it's almost like we're like face first into the point and we're still not getting it, because like, there are ways that we talk about this, right? Like, how many times have you heard financial planning? Like, what are your goals? Like, how much have you heard, coming from your personal trainer? Like, what are your goals? But like, no one asks from a personal level, like, what are your goals? I think that, of course people do, like, right? Like, there's a lot of spiritual people and there's like a lot of mental health professionals and whatever, but like, nobody is saying this is like undercover really important, because this sets the foundation of your life. Because when you start moving forward and making decisions, there's going to be a lot of complexity while simultaneously having ambiguity. and confusion surrounding the decisions that you should be making if you don't have a really foundation, like a strong foundation and understanding of who you are and what you want. And I know that I'm coming off this way and people are like, I'm still young, I still don't know what I want, I was in a really unhealthy situation or a toxic situation, I need to cycle into a better situation. And like I totally understand that, like, this is not a perfect process, but it's a really guess I'm Mario now. It's really important to relinquish control over, you know, your perceived destiny. And you're like, well, what do you mean relinquish control? You're just like asking to get control over it. I think there's a difference between, you know, having such tight control. Like, I think we are all kind of familiar with the difference of being like a control freak versus being a planner who is open for possibilities and surprises, right? So relinquishing this control, obviously aligning to your intuition is like super important. Removing anything that is like a superficial thing in your life. This could be old trauma and emotional debris. It could also be like physical debris around your apartment, like my issue. So relinquishing control, aligning to your intuition, and what else? Maybe the spiritual component here is just having kind of like hope and faith, because it's kind of interesting. I feel like as I go through this process of kind of learning and understanding and also teaching others, it's like this sense of hope and faith is like not the whole point, but like it's just this like kind of like special sauce, I guess you could say. Like it's like the special ingredient. It's like not the main ingredient, but the special one that like really elevates what your kind of thoughts, feelings, emotions, and physical body and sense is into life. And like I always feel like whatever I'm trying to do, I kind of, because I like percentages, so I always ask my spirit guides, like, what is like the percentage of this task or this healing process or going on to the next thing? And it's always like this 10% that like hope and faith and optimism is like, it's still very much part of that process. And I don't know why, like, I don't really understand hope, faith, and optimism's like exact energetic resonance, to be honest with you. It could be that it's like an intention. It could be that it's an open energetic channel. It could just be, I don't know. Like, I really don't know. But I do know that it's important in some way, shape, or form. I'm sure there's a few other things that kind of add up to this equation of making sure that you have a solidified identity and you know and understand your place amongst other people. But I feel like those are kind of like the big three, essentially. Let me just like pause to see if there's anything else. No, I feel like I can move on. Okay. So rounding back to the topic at hand, what we don't know, need to start emphasizing this as a concept, because I honestly feel that people get so black and white, so linear. One, because I think that in a way it is important, right? Like, we have to also have people who think this way because they do amazing and great things in science, math, medical fields, right? But it could be really detrimental for the majority of our collective to be thinking this way, because the issue with this type of thinking is that while in a lot of ways it's long-term, right? Obviously, like, there are like science, math, medical projections for the future. It's almost like this like circular energy, right? Like, it's like you're only really kind of observing or deducing the current moment, and there's not enough theory and philosophy and intuition to inspire the collective, to keep us in a very positive, healthy mental, emotional state. And also having intuition alignment that can really propel our consciousness to do bigger, badder, greater things. Like, this is the element that's more like personal, while the math, science, and medicine is more, practical, tangible, physical, whatever. But that's really only like the physical component of our life is really execution, right? But it is not a driving force. It allows people to continue their driving force, right? Because it keeps people alive in some sense. But I don't know, I just feel like we're lacking so much with cultivating and supporting people's driving force. Like, it's like we just expect people to have this like insane autopilot wanton desire to keep moving forward. And, you know, I don't know, it's just way too much focus on the physical execution. We're not asking enough why, in my opinion. Keep questioning, keep aligning to your wants, feelings, and desires for yourself, for others. Relinquish control about what is right or wrong, what is, you know, real or truthful, particularly if you're just looking face value. Keep aligning to your intuition and be optimistic and hopeful. And I think that's like a pretty good soup recipe. I hope.